one of the things I love most about the business is just I love the people I get to hang out with. And I've worked in cubicles, and I didn't get to pick who had the cubicles next to mine.
Mhm.
And that wasn't always enjoyable. But dang, I don't see anyone on my calendar looking up there on my co-writes coming up that I'm not looking forward to hanging out with. What a blessing that is.
Welcome to the Songwriting Chronicles, a podcast about, well, songwriting. Join me, your host, Sunday Joe, as I take you on a journey through the world of songwriting, where I'll share my personal experiences as a songwriter, interviews with other songwriters and industry pros, and provide valuable tips, tools, and tricks to help you achieve your songwriting goals. Today's guest is one of my favorite people who's been coaching me in the world of songwriting since 2020. And I can truly say that I am a better songwriter because of Brent Baxter. Brent is the host of Songwriting Pro and an award-winning songwriter with cuts by Alan Jackson, Randy Travis, Lady A, Joe Nichols, Ray Stevens, Andy Griggs, Buddy Jewell, and more. I had to take a breath there. Brent also co-hosts the Climb Show Music Business podcast with the one and only Johnny Dwinell. So join us today as we dive into some great conversation about hit songs, writing songs people want to hear, living out our faith in the music industry, and more. Before we dive in though, I'd love to ask a favor. If you are enjoying the Songwriting Chronicles, hey, let us know, let others know, leave us a comment, like, share, all the things. That helps us stay visible in this crazy world full of podcasts, right? And we can't do it without you. And now, without further ado, let's dive in to today's episode with hit songwriter Brent Baxter. All right, thanks, Brent, for being here today, for taking time out of your schedule to hang out with us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So I want to start with the first question. I know that you technically haven't grown up at all, but my first question is, what made you want to be a songwriter when you grew up?
I was already pretty well grown, I guess, by the time that hit me. So it was 1994. It was like Christmas break in 94. So I was probably a sophomore in college because I'm old. And at Arkansas State University, and my buddy Tim from back home in Batesville, Arkansas, I've been writing like bad poetry and stuff because I'd always been writing stuff. But this was what I thought was a poem, but he'd gotten a guitar for his birthday in October before that and was, playing around. We were both country music fans. And he took what I thought was a poem and he put it to music. But the poem I'd written was set up just like a lyric. I mean, it had a repeating chorus and everything. I just didn't recognize it as that. And he took it and he put a melody to it. Actually, he took a melody that he'd written for our other buddy Clint's song and said, I'm just going to do that for this lyric. And put it with that. And I was like, I was hooked like from then, because then it was something, it was collaborative. Like, we could sit around and he could play something that I wrote, like all the short stories and bad poetry I'd written, all that good stuff. No one ever saw unless I turned it in for extra credit for my honors English class. Now it could get to the world because my buddy Tim, since I don't play and sing, he could go play it around the campfire for people, or he could play it at, church youth group stuff or whatever to get into the world. And so that just really hooked me.
So with writing poetry, like I remember writing poetry as a kid and I would be so afraid to show it to people now, like humiliated to show it to people now. But also I'm like, well, I was a kid, so maybe it was pretty good for being a kid. But was that hard for you to step out and, show that vulnerability on that side?
I guess it doesn't speak well of my ego, but no, it wasn't. Because I don't know, I just always liked getting out there where it could be shared. I mean, that was just novel, and there's a little bit of distance because like with the poetry stuff, it just was never really meant for public consumption. I wrote one of the earliest things I wrote, a long time ago, was basically like a Christian poem. It's called Mr. Christian, How Can You Smile? And it got in like the church bulletin one week or something. I thought that was kind of cool.
Nice.
And other than that, there just wasn't outlets for that kind of stuff. It probably would have been and should have been embarrassing if that stuff had gotten out there because it just wasn't very good. But like my short stories and stuff, my English teacher would like them. I get extra credit. But then, you're not passing that around for your buddies in ninth grade to read. Hey, here's a story about a whatever. So not doing that. I didn't run with that crew. And so with the songwriting too, is for Tim to go and play and sing the stuff out, the few places you could every now and again around a campfire, it's like, it's with your friends and there's a distance because it's not my voice, it's not my guitar. I didn't write it all the way. So mainly they're focused on him and what he wrote. And someone may turn to you and go, that's really cool, Brent,
Yeah.
And so there's a little bit of distance there as well. But probably just a healthy dose of delusion and ego, that thinking it was a way better than it was,
Right.
which can be helpful.
Right. And I
Helpful
think
as long as you're still willing to learn.
right. I think I think that's just confirmation, even though that was small, of, hey, I'm headed in the right direction. Like I've been given a gift and I'm not horrible at it. I can continue to learn and get better.
Yeah, I think it's, the delusion, like if I'd seen myself with today's eyes about, how far away I was at the beginning, but having, the skills I had then, that gap would have just seemed insurmountable.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have taken all the fun out of it, going, oh, that's crap, that's crap, that's crap. And, yeah. But so thankfully I didn't have that, but I had just enough of, I like this. I think this is good. We use the phrase, this is just as good as the stuff on the radio, which it was not. So
You've never heard
kept
that
us
before.
enjoying No, never. And it's like when I hear that, I'm like, I don't know. I know when I used to say that, it was,
Right.
I say it less now than I did then, right? And my songs are way better now, but it kept me enjoying the process and going. And so I was getting my hours. And then also I was hungry to learn and wanted to learn. So I was like delusional enough to think it was just as good as the stuff on the radio, but I was humble enough to want to keep learning because I didn't think I knew it all. And I think that was kind of a little bit of a golden ticket right there.
Right. Right. Yeah. If we ever think we have it all figured out, I think we're in deep trouble.
Yeah, because it changes on you.
Right.
You can't ever have it all figured out.
Right. So you've had your songs recorded by some pretty big names in the industry. Can you share with us a memorable moment, maybe a story about one of your songs being chosen by a well-known artist?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest song I've had so far is Monday Morning Church by Alan Jackson. And I had moved to Nashville March 3rd of 2002 from Arkansas. And I brought that song with me. I'd written it back in Arkansas with a girl named Erin Enderlin who was going to MTSU. She was also from Central Arkansas. So I was living in Little Rock, met her. She was back over spring break. We wrote this song. And so, she was in Murfreesboro, which is just outside of Nashville, going to college. And so then by the time I moved there, she was already working it and stuff. And then I came and I worked it as much as I could, which wasn't very much because I really didn't know anybody for the most part. But I remember driving to Nashville going, okay, I'm going to give it 2 years. Not that I'm going to give it 2 years and quit. No, I'm going to give it 2 years and then I'm going to come up for air and just kind of check my pulse and see how I'm doing. So this is not a quit or go home. It's just like, just get there, work, head down, just go chase it. And then after 2 years, let's pop my head up and go, how am I doing? Know? And so I went out with some buddies. My buddy Tim, who I'd written that first song with, he had moved to Nashville at that point as well to chase the music thing. And so we went out to eat with, some other friends to celebrate kind of my 2-year anniversary of moving to town, because that's just kind of a big day. And I came back that night, and by that point, the song was Monday Morning Church was on hold for Terry Clark, because Aaron's publisher, she started working with a publisher. He got on hold for Terry Clark. She was supposed to be cutting like that week, and so I was excited about that. Going, yeah, 2 years is going pretty good, and so I came in that night. This is before I had a cell phone, and there was a message on my answering machine from Aaron going, and so I got in like 1 o'clock, and she's like, "Hey Brent, it's Aaron. Got some news. All right, talk to you soon." I was like,
Oh,
what? I'm thinking, okay, Terry Clark is supposed to be cutting this week. She didn't sound sad. I think I got a Terry Clark cut. But it was like 1 a.m. I couldn't call Aaron yet. I didn't want to, So I just basically laid there in bed with my eyes wide open until like 8 o'clock in the morning. Then I called her and I'm like, "What's up?" She said, "Well, Terry didn't cut the song." I'm like, "Oh." She was, "But Alan Jackson put it on hold." I was like, "Oh, I don't know what to do with this." I thought I had a Terry Clark cut, which was thrilled about. I was up all night thinking about it. First cut, whatever. But so there's disappointment there, but then you have a legend put it on hold. You're like, I don't know how to feel right now. I'm not sure what to do with this because, it's just a bigger maybe. And then within a month, it got cut. And I remember her publisher. I was working at Blue Water Music at the time, but not on the creative side. I was working on the admin side, and so I was putting in other people's royalty money into our system. So I was doing that, and I remember Jeff Carlton, who was Aaron's publisher. He called me, and he's like, "Well, you sitting down?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Alan cut it." And I was just doing the arm pump in
Right.
my little big corner office, you know. And he's like, "Now listen, they haven't turned it in, they haven't played it for the label yet, so they don't want word getting around about everything that Alan's cut. So just kind of keep it under your hat for now." I'm like, "Are you freaking kidding me?"
Right. I
I'm
just
like,
have to sit
I
on
need this
that.
now. Like, I gotta feel how long. He's like, "You can tell your folks, you can tell your parents, but that's like, this don't want word getting around." I'm like, "Well, I'm not gonna tell anybody because I don't want to screw this up. Sure, I
Right.
don't know how this works. And so I remember popping my head into my boss's, office in this old house on Music Row and be like, "Hey, Pete, I'm just take a little walk real quick." He's like, "All right." And I just walked around the block, which was on Music Row, and just like 10 feet off the sidewalk, just, I called my parents, and I just couldn't believe that. So I got a cut, and it's a freaking Alan Jackson cut,
Right.
you know? So that is such a memorable moment, a couple or string of moments for me that just like, oh, this is easy. 2 years? Sure. What can I get
Right.
done in 5?
That's incredible. That's an incredible story. I can't even wrap my head around. I mean, I am a huge Terry Clark fan, but I can't wrap my head
Yeah.
around hearing her sing that song, especially after hearing Alan Jackson sing it.
Yeah, I mean, she'd done great. Keith Stegall was producing her at the time, but it just didn't fit whatever project. Keith was really a big believer in that one, and originally my first hold on that, which was my first hold ever, was for Leanne Womack on that song, because he didn't have the deal. He was maybe going to cut some sides on her for what would have been her greatest hits record. So this is
Hmm.
after I Hope You Dance and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, she'd have just walloped that
Yeah.
song. The demo was actually demoed female. And if you've ever heard Erin's voice, it's
Hmm.
really country. She has a great voice, and you could hear like, okay, yeah, Leanne could kill
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And so credit to Alan, they played him the demo, which was female, and Alan heard it and was like, yeah, yeehaw, let's cut it.
Yeah.
So
Which, to that point for a second, that's kind of uncommon, right? So what I've learned, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is
mhm.
a lot of males don't necessarily hear through a female demo as well as a female can hear through a male demo. Is that right?
I mean, that's the conventional wisdom. That's what I've been hearing for over 20 years. So I don't know if anyone's done a statistical analysis of that, or if it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because knowing that, I'm less likely to demo something female if it can go both ways, right?
Hmm.
Just because you're like, well, if that's true, okay, girls are smarter than guys. They can hear that. Why not? Let's go with that and just give yourself a better shot. So I think with that being the conventional wisdom, it's also, you get less songs demoed female if a guy could sing it. You'd be like, let's just
Hmm.
demo it male and we can pitch it to both. So I don't know. I mean, God bless Alan and Keith for hearing that and
Yeah.
just going, okay, that's just a song, and we can change the pronouns back later. And which, when I wrote the lyric, I wrote the first draft of the lyric and brought it to Aaron. The first draft was male point of view, just because that was my point of view, and it made
Right.
sense to me being in the context of the song. This guy that he lost his wife, and she was more the spiritual, you know, more spiritually mature than he was. He was
Hmm.
spiritually kind of riding her coattails, and I think that's unfortunately true in a lot of marriages, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And so that just made sense to me. But then Erin, when she did her thing on it, she switched it to female, which works. It also works.
Right.
And then Alan switched it back. So
I love it.
found where it's supposed to go.
So you mentioned lyrics, right? In the lyrics. So you are a lyricist,
Mhm.
not a melody guy. Do you think that that makes it
Correct.
harder to break into the business as a songwriter? And if so, how do you make that work?
Yeah, I think it does make it harder, just because I mean, I'd love to be a Brad Paisley or a Vince Gill or Keith Urban, who can like write great, play great, sing great, all just the triple threat where I can do all of it.
Hmm.
Because then a publisher or whoever, you can just hop in the room with anybody at any time, or just by yourself and be self-contained and do all of it.
Hmm.
And so you just have more opportunity. Because there are certain rooms I don't quite fit in because this is what I do. This is my lane.
Are you a songwriter looking to take your creativity to the next level? Listen up because I've got something special just for you. Introducing the Full Focus Planner, your ultimate tool for unleashing your songwriting potential. It's time to go beyond ordinary notebooks and scattered ideas and take control of your creative process. I have literally used this thing for years and it has changed how I pursue my songwriting goals. With the Full Focus Planner, you'll find a structured system designed specifically for songwriters like you. And it is the perfect companion to help you set clear goals, plan your songwriting sessions, and stay on track to create your best work. So imagine having a dedicated space to capture your inspirations, to map out your song structures, track your progress, all in one place. Well, the Full Focus Planner provides that platform to organize your thoughts and ideas, ensuring that no brilliant melody or lyric is going to slip through the cracks. But it doesn't stop there. The Full Focus Planner also incorporates proven productivity strategies that help you manage your time effectively, eliminate distractions, and stay focused on what truly matters, which is your music, right? I seriously call my planner my second brain. Like, I cannot imagine trying to navigate through the ins and outs of every day without it. It truly is a lifesaver for me. So, whether you're a seasoned songwriter or you're just starting out, the Full Focus Planner is a game changer for your songwriting. It empowers you to establish a routine, maintain consistency, and confidently achieve your songwriting goals. So, why settle for average when you can excel? Elevate your songwriting journey today with the Full Focus Planner. You can find the link in the show notes. And when you use code SundayJoe10, you'll get $10 off your first order. That's SundayJoe10, SUNDIJO, the number 10. And I will share the link in the show notes for you. Now, let's get back to the show.
So I think it does make it harder, especially being a non-performing songwriter. I wasn't out doing all the writers' nights, and so still when I'm in Nashville or whatever, I'm not the one going to hop up on stage and do the freak show or do whatever night it might be and do a round and kind of get my name and my face out there. My songs might be out there with other people singing them,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not so much me. So that is a challenge, and you have to work around it. And so what I did when and it was a different era when I got to Nashville in 2002, but I was rocking with a, cassette tape in my, back pocket with,
Mm-hmm.
some songs on it with the lyric, typed up and folded and rubber banded, just like NSAI said to do it, you know, and I'd go out and what I'd do is I had a few contacts. So of course, Erin was one of them. And through her, through one of her rounds, I met my buddy Anthony Oreo, who we're still good friends. We were just texting this morning before I came on here, but I would go see her around, and maybe she'd play Monday morning church, maybe she wouldn't, but I would see who was sitting on the right and left of her, because you figure, okay, she must know these people. Sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
don't always know the people in your round, but a lot of times you do. And so one day she was sitting next to this guy named Anthony who was in her round, and he was she was at MTSU, he was at Vandy, so they're both young, a few years younger than me. But I liked what he did, so I'd go up and start chatting with him. Like, yeah, I write some with Aaron, and we wrote Monday Morning Church, and maybe she played that night, or he'd heard it in another round or whatever. Oh, I love that song. And we just start chatting. This is before it gets cut. And then he and I start writing together and get to know each other. Then I'd start going to his rounds too and go, who's sitting on the right and left of Anthony?
Right.
Hey, I'm Brent. I write with Anthony. We wrote this song that he played. Oh, okay. And just using that to be kind of so it's all through relationships. It was a little bit more of a warm handoff than a cold call.
Right.
And so that just worked better for me. And then eventually start, just getting to know more and more people. And so that's just kind of how I approached it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, just the cold walk and say hi to somebody and see if you can get in a room with them. But I found my batting average was definitely better if I could just, hey, yeah, that person you just played the round with, yeah, I write with them as well. And they played that song that we wrote. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Much better batting average on
Great
that.
in, yeah. Well, I think it's really important to talk about that for a second because the way you explained it, right,
Mhm.
was you didn't just go up, meet somebody, everything was great. You guys were writing a song together. Here, hey, here's my lyrics. You should write with me because I'm amazing,
Mhm.
right? None of that happened. You had to build
Right.
relationships. And so I think we
Yeah.
forget. I think we forget that there's a process to that, right? And it's not
Mhm.
just overnight. And just what I'm learning in the short time that I've really been diving into songwriting is if you don't have the patience
Mhm.
to walk through that and truly build relationships and not just try to be a salesman,
Yeah,
you are in the wrong industry. But I
for
mean, and
sure.
that really goes with anything, but
Yeah. Yeah, it's all know, like, and trust. Which, if those people didn't know me, say first time I met Anthony, and he was in errands around, so I'm like, "Hi, I write with Aaron. We wrote, Monday Morning Church, which she just played." Well, then he doesn't know me, but he knows Aaron, and he respects her, and he knows that song, and he respects the song. So I'm using that as kind of my calling card, because you can't tell by walking up and shaking someone's hand whether they're a great writer or not, and basically if they're going to help you solve your problems, right?
right.
You just can't tell. There's just, man, great songwriters come in all shapes, sizes, personalities, vibes, whatever. You just can't tell. And you can't just say, I'm awesome, because, well, if you've been around the block, you realize that if somebody tells you that, they're probably not, unless you already know who they are, right?
Right.
That's like, kind of works the opposite. So you got to find a way to, get, I call it the know, like, and trust funnel. Everybody you meet is like at the top of that, and they don't know, like, and trust you yet,
Mhm.
unless you have a reputation or whatever, a positive one. But then how do you kind of work them through that funnel where at the bottom, a few of those people know, like, and trust you
Mhm.
in an authentic way? How do we do
Yeah.
that in a real way where you're genuinely interested in them, and helping them along the way, and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely. That's
definitely a patient process.
so important.
Hmm.
Songwriting can be very personal, can be deeply
Hmm.
personal, and kind of an emotional process. So how do you approach writing songs that resonate with people, with the listeners on a personal level?
Um, it's funny because, well, I do a lot of writing with artists these days, and on different variety of levels of artists, of where they are in their careers, and so I'm just trying to be in those rooms, help them tell their story, and help them um, dive into what they want to emotionally.
Hmm.
Oh, and a lot of times it's like, I need a show opener, or I need something to go in the set, and so we're probably writing a lot of tempo, and so not a ton of the, like, really emotional songs. Um, or if we are, like, how do we take that seed of emotion and put it in a way that's maybe more commercially viable, meaning some
Hmm.
tempo and anthemic and that sort of thing. But as far as the, um, for myself, it's interesting because I look at it so much like I'm in the service business, so it's not about me.
Hmm.
Like, it's not about, hey, there's this thing I really want to write about. There might be, like, if I'm in the room with another writer and we're not, um, there's not an artist in the room. There's not a specific project, and now we're just trying to, best song wins. Now we're just like,
Hmm.
what moves us? What do we want to write about? And so for me, though, I don't bring a lot of those in these days, because I'm like, if it's going to be a ballad, we're going to have to write Song of the Year. Otherwise, it's just not going to get cut if there's not an artist in the room. And I got a lot of mouths to feed at the house. So I'm looking at what can serve an artist. And if this is not serving an artist, an audience, it might serve an audience, but if it can't get through the artist and the producer and the label, it's not going to serve the audience.
Right.
And so most of the time, I'm bringing in more tempo ideas, stuff that I think can be pitched to a lot of artists. And then on the flip side, when I'm in the room with an artist, well, still, you want a tempo wins, and you want something that's going to go on their live show.
Hmm.
Could be a single on radio, which is mostly tempo. So it's like the more I write, the less of those um, really emotional, like, ballady things I write,
Hmm.
because the bar is just higher and higher. Which, ironically, because we'd start off talking about Monday Morning Church, which is one of those songs, and it's the biggest song of my career so far, and very emotional, and kind of breaks all the rules I just talked about.
Right.
So what do I know? I don't know. But that's why I haven't had one of those again. Um, but I try to be really picky on going, okay, this has got to be a ballady kind of thing. It's just got to be something that I have to say, and it's not just a "girl, you're gone" kind of thing. It's
Hmm.
like, got to be really, it has to be written.
Right.
And I've had a few of those. There are some of those, and I remember there's a song I wrote called "The Sermon." I wrote with my buddies Jason Cox and Michael Boggs, who we both had people we're close to going through cancer, and in that struggle. And I know my friend ended up losing that. Well, she completed the battle with cancer, and I think their friend did too. But they were all going through that, and writing that song was the most I've ever cried writing a song, the most I've ever
Mhm.
cried listening back to a song over the years. And it's a thing of, yeah, it was very cathartic, but it just trying to, I don't know if other people hear it and feel that way, but it's been cut and it's, been passed around. And you try to find people you trust, and it helped that we both had, like, we could, for me the song's about Jeannie, for them the song's about their friend,
Right.
and we're able to write it in a way that could fit both. And so I think it's bringing it into the right room
Yeah.
is a big part of it. So
Yeah.
building some trust, because that was not the first song I'd written with those guys. I think that's an important part of it too. It's kind of finding your people where it's a safe kind of place to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. You're right. It's so important to find your people. So
Hmm.
you're a man of faith, who's mostly written in
Yeah.
country music, but you've branched out to Southern gospel in the last couple years. Has
Hmm.
has living out your faith in the country music industry, has that been challenging? And if so, how have you tackled that?
I mean, sometimes it's challenging, but mostly not. Just because if I made it through college and fraternity without like going totally off the rails,
Right.
I've already prepared for the music business. I feel like I think the biggest challenge for me with faith is the faith and not making the music and the songwriting itself an idol. There have definitely been seasons when I've been a less than stellar husband. I got married to my wife after Monday morning church hit, or we were, it was starting to be the award season after, like, so she met me just as that was happening and that ride was going on. But then, yeah, I made the joke earlier about, oh, where could I be in 5 years? Well, I was struggling 5 years later. I think
Hmm.
I was out of a publishing deal, and, just trying to make ends meet and that sort of thing. And, you know, so like somebody said this to me one time, and it struck a chord. She was having some argument with her husband. She's an artist and a writer. She's like, you know, I've loved music longer than I've loved you. Like, I may not love it more, but I've loved it longer. There's this thing, right? And I was like, yeah, I loved music before I loved my wife, before I ever met her. And there was definitely a sense from her end of like competition, of just some jealousy about that. And on my end, there's also desperation because I don't want to quit doing this.
Right.
I don't want to have to go get a job. I've had a job. I don't want to do that again. And so I want it to work. I really want it to work. And so I got to put more into it. There's this other thing I can go to, some other opportunity I can reach for and grab. And I wasn't home as much as I should have been, and I just wasn't as emotionally um, present as I should have been so many times. So that's something I would love to go back and change. So it's like for me, I was not honoring her. I was not honoring God in that I was making songwriting an idol. And so there have been some times where God goes, okay, well, I'm going to have you march Isaac up the mountain, and I'll have you lay it down
Hmm.
and give it to me, and let the rubber hit the road, I guess, on what's most important to you. So I've had to do that a few times, and I have a way, I've grown a lot spiritually through that and just over the years. So it's a much better balance now. I have much more faith that he's going to take care of us,
Hmm.
even though the stakes are higher now than they've ever been, because now I'm older, and so it's not going to be easier to get a job and change careers. And I have
Right.
5 kids, and my wife stays home, and so there's a lot more riding on it now than there ever was before, when it's just like the two of us, and we're young, and it's pretty easy to hit the reset button. But there's a lot more of this track record of God being faithful and coming through for us, that we can like
Hmm.
rest in that. Like I tell people that like closing the laptop is an act of worship.
Mm.
Going, okay, it's 3. Hazel's about to get off the school bus. I'm gonna close the laptop, shut it down
Mm.
till it's time to work again. I'm not perfect at that, but that better at being mentally present, that sort of thing. But going, okay, because I'm trusting God that He's going to handle what I
Right.
can't.
Yeah.
So for me, that's been the biggest challenge. Is not so much the, the partying and all that stuff. That never has been as big of a, I'm used to going out and hanging out. Other people can be drinking and I'm not, and that's fine. That doesn't bother me and doesn't bother other people. You find your crew. That's another thing is you start finding your people, your
Hmm.
writer crew that you just gel with. And a lot of my writes, even country writes, will end up talking Jesus and talking life during the write and that sort of
Hmm.
thing. And so there's not as much, I've never felt as much the pressure there. There are certain artists that I've written with, and we might write some good songs together, but I'm looking at it long term thinking, what does success look like with this artist? Like if it does well, might get a cut or two. Am I going on the road with this artist? Like, would that be good?
Hmm.
Would I fit in on the bus? Boy, probably not. This probably doesn't have the legs to go a long way versus this artist over here. I feel like lifestyle were more compatible. I would fit in more on the bus if we're going to write.
Right.
My wife would be happier, and less like, what is going on out there? And that sort of thing. And so that's one thing I try to make decisions on too, going, okay, what does the long term thing look like? If I'm
Yeah.
going to put my energy into some different artists and investing, I want to look at not just who might be a good investment like financially, but the metaphorical and literal, what do I fit in on the bus?
Yeah. That makes
That's
sense.
what I think yeah.
Yeah. You said as a songwriter the stakes are higher, and as a songwriter with
Mhm.
five kids, you probably get to eat less steak.
The stakes are higher and further and fewer in between. Yes. They're more rare than ever. I like my
Right?
steak rare,
Yeah.
but not this
Ba-dum-bum.
rare. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, as the host of Songwriting Pro, which
Mhm.
has been just really an incredible resource and community for me,
Well,
I
thank
mean,
you.
it truly has made me a better songwriter. So, I mean, you've built a thriving online songwriting community. So, what motivated you to create that platform? And how do you feel that it's impacted the songwriting community? I mean, I know what I can say, but how do you feel it has?
Yeah, you have a better sense of how it's impacted the community probably
Yeah.
than I have. But really, it started. So I'm an old NSAI member. I was a member back in Arkansas before I moved. I'm a lifetime member now. But I used to do some work for them back when times were more lean after Monday morning church. I would one of the people they one of the pros that would do you get your once or twice a year hour-long meeting with a pro. And so I was one of those pros. So I'd get kind of paid for doing that. Other pros did like song feedbacks and stuff. I never did that very much. But I was doing some stuff to make a little extra money. And then, so I was doing a lot of coaching. My parents are retired school teachers now. So there's just kind of a teaching and talking. And I enjoy geeking out about the songwriting process and stuff. So there's that. So I had this kind of history of that for several years and going to the workshops and helping run the NSAI workshops and that sort of thing. And then one of those Isaac up the mountain times was when well, I did the video series Man versus Row for NSAI, which may still be lingering in the archive
Hmm.
somewhere, in the mothballs. But there was a time where I had to go hang it up for a while and go do a day job. Like my son Ozzy, my firstborn, biological, he was on the way and I needed some health insurance. So I started working at Starbucks and eventually, publishing. I was doing Starbucks and a publishing deal. And it was with an investor, and those are very unstable. And so after a while, he got out of the business. And so then it was time to go like do a job. My wife was like done with the music business and all that came with it and all that didn't come with it. And so I went and did a sales gig for a few years, ended up being like 4 years. And so I didn't have much time for the music at that point because boy, at night and stuff, you now I got a newborn,
Hmm.
and then we had Ruby Jean come along a couple of years later, and it had to keep a really very small footprint in my life because, like again, my wife is just done. She didn't want me to get back in, and I didn't know how to get back in really because like now I got these kids, I can't. A publishing deal might be like 20 something thousand a year. We can't all four of us live on that.
Right.
There's just no way.
Definitely no
And so
stakes.
definitely no stakes. And just trying to figure that out. And thankfully, it was a sales gig, and God knows what He's doing. He put me in this thing, and they gave me an iPhone. I'm like, ooh, that's fancy, and it had all the podcast capabilities. And so I started listening to podcasts. Started listening to like business podcasts, online business podcasts, like how to quit your job and work for yourself podcasts, which you can't do if you're sitting in a cubicle. That gets awkward, right? And the
Right.
man's walking around and you listen. What do you listen to? How to quit this? But in the truck, I could do that when I'm driving around all day, and started like, okay, the seed was planted going, okay, well, so that's when I started the Man versus Row blog, and that used to be the website Man vs Row, and because that series started back in the day when like Man versus Food, Man versus
Mm-hmm.
Wild, all that stuff was kind of the thing, like Man versus like Music Row, and so I started blogging a little bit because I could basically write my blogs. I got pretty good at driving and writing like on a notebook longhand without looking at the page as
Wow.
I'm driving because it
That
had a
I'm
big center
impressed.
console and I could just write. It'd be all slanted and stuff, but or when I was pulled over for a sales call, I'd make notes, and so I did a lot of that stuff like while I was in transit to the next stop or in between, and then I could do that blogging like early in the morning. You can get on the computer and put it up, and just the hope was maybe one day I can turn this into something, and that would be the stable platform from which I can launch back into the creative life. So what do I
Mm-hmm.
know? I know songwriting. So it was all about that. Eventually, my buddy Johnny and I started the Climb podcast, and just so that that's really how it started. Going, how can I hang around the music business and maybe let this be again the stable platform that allows me to go do the unstable creative things.
Mm-hmm.
And just by God's grace, I mean, we had adopted Ren and Quill in 2017 from China, and now I have 4 kids, a wife who stays home, and I had the sales gig. But at this point, I remember I did it was on Google Hangouts at the time, so I didn't know about Zoom at this point. And my wife and probably just the 2 kids at this point had gone to Missouri to go visit family or something. So they were out of town, and I had to stay because I had to work. I don't have time off because I have a day job.
Right.
And so I knew they were going out of town. So I set my first like workshop, like pay me through. I don't remember how I set up payment, but like $50, and I'm going to teach for like 2 hours. And I had like 10 people sign up, so there was like $500 I made one night while like the wife and kids are away. Again, small footprint. I don't want this to be a thing. Let's just test this though.
Right.
And when my wife got back, I was like, I made $500. She's like, hmm. And that door started to open a little bit.
I might not hate the
A little
music
more.
business after all.
Huh. This might. I mean, it's just funny because because who knew about podcasting and online stuff, and like,
Right.
especially my wife was not into. She didn't follow that stuff. She didn't care. Like it was not real to her. But it started becoming a little more real, and becoming more real to me too. Going, okay, and so just trying to figure out ways to help people, and just over the years it grew. And we had Ren and Quill home for about 6 or 7 months, and it was hard, just with all the trauma that comes with adoption, international adoption, language barriers, and all the stuff that they'd been through. And you know, Songwriting Pro had been growing because that's what it was called by this point. Had been growing, but it still was nowhere near like replacing the income from the sales gig. It seemed like we were using all of both to
Mm-hmm.
get by on. But we were sitting in church, and the preacher was preaching about taking a chance and really stepping out in faith, and we both felt led by the Spirit like it's time to jump
Mm-hmm.
back in. And I didn't trust myself because I'm like, well, that's what I want.
Right.
You know, I can hear that selfishly, yeah, because that's the answer I want to get. But when my wife felt that, then I knew it was real because she did not want that. It was unstable. She'd been through that. But God had grown me up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But she basically needed me around more just to help with the kids, and to have more flexibility. I wasn't gone a ton. I was working with kind of regular business hours, but it was going to be very helpful for her to have me be there more flexibly. And so we made the jump, and then I had to rebuild a lot of relationships from before, writing relationships, publisher relationships, which I'd done some of that through the blog and through the podcast, getting my name out there, so hopefully people hadn't forgotten about me. But then we made the jump in November of 17, I guess, and so just been back full time in the music business since then, and now we have we've adopted again, so we have 5 kids, and Emily still stays home. And I don't understand the math on it. It doesn't make sense, but somehow we keep eating. And yes, steaks are extremely rare, but like we're eating,
Yeah.
and I'm home a lot to help with the kids and help Emily, whatever, and still getting stuff done. And my career's grown since coming back. And I don't understand it, but God is good.
Right, he is. Well, and he honored the desire of your heart, but also
Mhm.
confirming that through your wife makes a huge difference when you're on the same page, about
Oh
that.
yeah,
And so he usually doesn't make sense.
right. Yeah.
Faith usually looks crazy. So,
It does, and for us to even adopt, we're like, how is this going to work? We feel like we are using all of our money. We can't afford it. We're stretched as it is. The 4 of us with me with the sales gig. How are we going to have 2 more? For one thing, I was like, well, we'll know it's God's will because there's no way we're coming up with like $70,000 to adopt these kids from
right.
China. Because if there's one thing I've proven in my life, I'm really good at not making $70,000 show up when I want to show up. And but he but there's that saying, God's will, God's bill. And he paid the bill. He just made us show up. And so that was a huge faith builder for us to go, okay, you're doing what he wants you to do. Look how he came through.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we are able to go get him.
I
And
say that
so
all the
it
time,
is that building of that trust and that faith.
Yeah. God owns a cattle on 1,000 hills, and sometimes we got to ask God to
Yeah.
sell a cow.
I've been pretty close to putting that on some adoption paperwork when they're going into all your finances, especially on Hazel's. We're like, I don't know how we're going to look on paper now because, again, I'd left the sales gig, so I didn't have steady income. Now we're 4 kids, one person making income, and I was just really tempted to put on there like financial income, like, well, my dad owns cattle on 1,000 hills.
I mean,
Pick it up with him.
right? It's worth a
I don't
shot.
know. Yeah.
So, you mentioned the climb a while ago. It
Mhm.
focuses on the music business side of songwriting. And I will share the link to Songwriting Pro and the climb in the notes. But
Okay.
what key insights or tips can you share with emerging songwriters about navigating the industry?
Ooh, man. Go listen to 600 episodes of The Climb. No,
Absolutely, do it.
I'd say, it's so many things. I'll probably just start with the acronym I use all the time. RAP, write, record, access, and pitch, which is actually on my coffee mug right here, if you can see it.
Yeah, you are the king of acronyms for sure.
Yes, I know. I love it. So it helps me remember things. But you got to be writing, right? You got to put in the hours. I got an email from someone the other day about, hey, I've written 50 songs and like 20 of them are demoed. I'm like, you're using this to tell me you're good, right? Because that's no amount of songs. You're just a fledgling, if that. You're like a little songwriter, an embryo at 50 songs.
Right.
So, you have value and you have worth, but you're probably not a pro yet. So you got to write. You got to be writing. You just got to get your reps in. You got to, you have to love the process of being a writer. Do you love writing or do you want to have written? Like you got to be driven to this thing. You got to write.
Mhm.
And then if you want to make it as a pro, you have to record. You have to get them in some sort of form where people can hear them and respond. So you got to work on that. Not every song needs to make it past work tape in your phone or whatever. Not every song deserves that, but you need to start capturing them and moving them along that process. The other thing is A for access, which is you got to make relationships and build friendships with people in and around the business. And as we talked about before, that's patient. You want to be authentic. You just want to be the real you and think about how you can add value to other people and what they're doing and not just be a taker because that nobody wants to be around that. They're not
Right.
trying to solve your problems. They're trying to solve their problems. And if you're helping them solve their problems, you're going to be more valuable and welcome in their circle. So there's that. You have to consistently be working on that because, hey, the people you know now, they may not be in the business 5 years from now. You
Right.
got to consistently be growing those relationships. And then the P is for pitch. You actually have to get your song into someone's hand and get a yes or a no.
And you're
Now,
going to get a lot
this
more
takes
no's than
years.
yeses, just FYI.
Oh, for sure. Yes, without a doubt. Without a doubt. So it's like most of your songs aren't worth demoing. most of your demos aren't worth pitching. Most of your pitches get no's. Okay, it's like this war of attrition. I look at it like all these little song babies that I have, they're just storming the beach at Normandy and just getting mowed down, you know, and then a few make it up the
Right.
cliffs.
And yet we keep
And that
coming
you
back
have
for
to be
more.
okay with that. We keep coming back for more, for sure. Because you have to love the hope. You have to love when you do get a win. Every little inch of ground gained is significant, and you have to enjoy that and celebrate that, but not just build a house there.
Right.
So yeah, you want to be patient. You have to. It is so good. One of the things I love most about the business is just I love the people I get to hang out with. And I've worked in cubicles, and I didn't get to pick who had the cubicles next to mine.
Mhm.
And that wasn't always enjoyable. But dang, I don't see anyone on my calendar looking up there, my co-writes coming up that I'm not looking forward to hanging out with. What a blessing that is.
Right.
I mean, it's a business people are trying to get into. I remember other jobs I've had also in the cubicle where people hated their jobs and they're trying to get out of it. You don't get that in the music business. Now, you do get people that are jaded and they're, maybe like, I don't know what to do with my life. What else am I going to do?
Mhm.
The business sucks, streaming, you have that and you tend to go, I'm going to go over here where people are more positive, right? Because negativity will get you blacklisted,
Right.
not in any sort of official way, but just, I had a friend that he's started getting really negative about the business and he'd had some cuts and stuff, but just getting bitter about the whole thing. I'm like, dude, I can't be hanging out with that because that mess is contagious. Like, I'm trying to
Mhm.
protect my positivity here. Don't be spewing that hate at me, right? And he wasn't mad at me, but just like around me. I just get that gunk off me.
Mhm.
You have to protect your positivity and your optimism. You have to enjoy the process. But that's one thing I love is just being able to, like, I don't want to stop hanging around these people, these friends. These people are awesome. I love these people. I don't, I want to keep hanging out with them. So
Yeah.
I better go write some good songs.
Right. Absolutely. I love that
I don't know if
protection.
I answered your question at
No, you
all.
did. You did. And I love that protect your positivity. I think that is so important. Well, I could
Hmm.
ask you questions all day long, but I don't want to keep you all day. Anything else that you want to share with our listeners?
Thanks for listening. So yeah, man, if God calls you to this, He'll make the math work out. Of course, it's easy to say, "Well, God gave me the song," and usually that's because God didn't want it anymore. Um, so don't use that as like coming in to like play songs for somebody.
Right.
God gave me this song, because then what are they going to say? How can they respond to your song?
Right.
But usually it means the song's not that good. But just trust Him. You got to get your priorities right. We don't, this is not the purpose of life to write songs. And I've hit my head against that rock several times.
Hmm.
And it's better now that I have things much more in line with the proper priorities. Life just runs better. My marriage is a whole lot better. Same
Hmm.
woman, right? Different me. So I'm married to the same wife. She's married to a different husband. Uh, Maybe I should write that. Anyway,
I know. I
so
was just thinking that.
so that's hugely important is you want to have the priorities right. That's not the be all end all, because if it is, the business will break you and you'll be desperate, and desperate ain't pretty. I don't have to be as desperate because like God's proven time and again, like He'll take care of us somehow,
Hmm.
whether through the music business or some other way. So I don't have to sweat it so much. Just show up and do the best I can.
Hmm.
And yeah, listen to The Climb. That's a great entry level spot. We cover, I mean, we've been doing this for years, so there's a place to plug in. You can get that at theclimbshow.com, and songwritingpro.com is hopefully a lot of good resources as well. And
Yeah.
just study the business and the craft. It's a business, and it's a people business, just like every other business is. So be patient with it.
Yeah, absolutely. The Climb comes out, new episodes come out every Tuesday, and then every other week you do something called the Song Title Challenge. And so definitely
Yeah.
I would encourage you to listen to that and just to provide some more information about Songwriting Pro. Again, I'll share the links to all these in the show notes, but it's not just you coaching people. I mean, you're providing interviews with industry pros. You're also providing, jam sessions. Just ask me, where you're building that community. And so I highly encourage every songwriter to be a part of that for sure.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I didn't want it to be all about what do I know or what do I not
Right.
know. And so I want to bring in great people to, you know, fix the gaps, fill the gaps in my
Right.
knowledge, for
Right.
sure.
Well, we can't have all work and no play. So before you go, I want to play a quick game of rapid fire if you're up for it.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right,
So
let's do it.
just answer the first thing that comes to your mind. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
All right. Favorite time of day to write songs?
Mornings, mid-morning.
Monday mornings?
Oh,
See what I did there?
yes, yes, yes.
Anyway,
Just
all
trying
right.
to- I was like, yes, any morning.
I
Just let
haven't
me
had
have
it, right? I haven't had enough coffee, so I'm not very funny.
Really, my favorite time to write is any time I can write, right?
Right, right. Song you wish you'd written?
Oh, I mean, the first one that came to mind was "The House That Built Me," but there are tons of them. The song "Remembers When," man, what was that one? "The River and the Highway" was a Pam Tillis
Mm-hmm.
song. That was awesome. There's so many good ones.
Yeah, yeah.
So many good ones.
It's hard to pick. Vinyl records?
It is. Yeah.
Vinyl records or
Pardon?
digital streaming?
Digital streaming.
Okay. Favorite snack?
Convenient.
Convenience? Yes.
Convenience.
Favorite snack while working on music?
Coffee.
Coffee. Love it. Okay. Worst song idea? Worst song idea you've ever had that you're willing to admit?
Oh man, there's so many. I've not written this one yet, but I say it as a joke, and so I should probably not put it out there because I think I found a way to write it. But I'd say it as a joke to some of my Southern Gospel co-writers. The lamb is the goat.
I love it. And you heard it here first. Brent gets dibs on writing it. So
Exactly, but I think I figured out a way. It's just not a Southern Gospel thing. I have a friend who's a Christian rapper. I'm like, that might work for that.
I love it.
So it may not be as bad as you think.
Or Ray Stevens. I mean, that could fit in a Ray
Or-
Stevens lane.
There we go. Yeah, he'd be like the goat. What does that mean?
All right. Last question. Pumpkin spice. Yes or no?
Sure, bring it
Alright.
on. I
Alright.
normally do take my coffee black, but you can put pumpkin spice in anything. I ain't scared of it.
All right. I ain't scared.
I ain't
Well,
scared.
thanks for hanging out with us today, Brent. I really, really appreciate it. It's been fun. And again, thank you for all that you do. I truly am a better songwriter because of your investment in songwriters like us. So thank you so much.
Well, it's been fun watching you grow in your craft and your career and your relationships and stuff. So that has done me a world of good. I love seeing that. So keep on climbing.
I told you it was going to be a great interview. Man, I had so many questions I didn't even get to ask for time's sake, so I guess that we'll probably just have to do it again. Don't forget to check out the Climb podcast. They have new episodes every Tuesday, and then every other Friday they have a song title challenge, and that in itself is amazing. So don't forget to check that out. And Songwriting Pro, you will be glad you became a part of that community. And again, I will share the link in the show notes for you. And don't forget to tell others about the Songwriting Chronicles. It means a lot to us.
Thanks for listening to my Aunt Esther's podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends. And remember this: keep writing, keep dreaming, and keep pushing forward because your words matter.